the Strawberry Epidemic of '82. That's what people would come to call the tragedy that affected my childhood town in the summer of 1982. I was 16 back then, and I thought the world was my oyster. I came from one of the wealthiest families in town. I was popular in and out of school, and my mother was on the fast track to become mayor. Youth and privilege can be a bad combination, but I think the worst to come of it in my case was naivety. I didn't think anything horrible could happen to me or my friends and loved ones. The local church was sponsoring a charity event that summer, though I'm not sure how much it counts as charity if you use the money to buy new pews and give the pastor a raise. They collected a massive amount of food from various farmers in the area, and then for a $10 donation, people were welcome to eat as much of it as they wanted. Someone had donated a lot of strawberries to the church function, crates and crates of them. As a result, they were the most abundantly available food there. My family made an appearance, of course. We were the pedigree of the town, and it was important for us to be seen at every major event. My mother donated generously, probably under the impression that the more she gave, the more votes she could snag in the mayoral election. Politics. Got to love them. We didn't eat anything there, however, and that was probably what saved us. Though my mother made a big deal of supporting local farmers, all of our food was shipped to us by a private company specialising in catering to those who could afford it. She explained to me that fresh produce grown on small farms was more likely to be of lower quality and plagued by pests and disease. Today, I know she probably just didn't want us to eat the same food as poor people. Nearly every person at the function ate some strawberries, but the children gorged themselves on them, especially after the church provided bowls of sugar for them to dip the strawberries in. I saw one girl who'd stuffed her face with so many of them, her mouth and hands were stained red. She reminded me of those old vampire movies where the vampires were messy when they killed their prey. Everything was fine for about a week after the function. Then one night, little Billy Appleton was admitted to the hospital. Later in life, I found copies of the medical transcripts from that night. He was so malnourished and underweight, the doctors initially called CPS, assuming that his parents weren't feeding him. Then, other symptoms began to appear. Small, yellow boils popped up everywhere on his body. Over the next few weeks, those boils would swell to the size of golf balls. Another kid came in with the same symptoms later that day, then another, and another. After around a dozen sick kids came in, the elderly began to show up as well. Nobody panicked for a few days, although the rush of sick people was the talk of the town. Rumours flew as to the cause. Some were plausible, a new strain of chickenpox, and others were downright silly. The government was testing biological weapons on the American heartland. But everyone had a theory. Nobody made the connection to the strawberries until an older woman fell ill a week after the others. She'd taken some strawberries home with her from the church and ate them after most people's were gone. After telling the doctors about it, someone realised that all of the kids and elderly people had eaten strawberries at the church function. They sent samples of the strawberries away to be tested. The public was never told what the results were. All I know is, a few days after the samples were sent, and about 2.5 weeks after the first patient was admitted, the CDC and National Guard rolled into our town by the truckload. We were placed under quarantine. No one was allowed in or out of town. All of the remaining strawberries from the church were confiscated. Every citizen was required to submit a blood test. No one was told what was plaguing our town. After about 2 months or so, during which 30 people died in the hospital and were cremated without the family's consent, the government left our town. The official story told in the national news was that a new and deadly strain of E. coli from contaminated strawberries was responsible. Almost no one in our town believed that. But no one was interested in our version of things. No reporters came looking for interviews, and all attempts by the locals to tell their story in a newspaper or on television failed. The blog some of us had taken to writing in years to come were swept away into the ash bin of conspiracy theorists and Bigfoot hunters. I'm over 50 years old now, and I've never told anyone my version of things until now. See, I know what caused the Strawberry Epidemic of '82, and it wasn't E. coli. It wasn't even bacteria. One day, a week after the government left our town, I was hiking in the woods when I caught sight of someone moving through the trees. I followed them to a creek in a secluded part of the woods and saw it was a girl of about my age. She threw herself into the creek, which was only waist deep, and began to drink the water like someone who'd just crossed the desert. I called out to her as I approached. When she raised her head to look at me, I screamed. Her face and arms were covered in the same yellow boils as the people who ate the strawberries, only her boils were huge. They were about the size of tennis balls. The girl didn't react to me, except to blink and stare. After a minute of frozen terror, I noticed that the water of the creek was clouding with yellow and red fluid. The girl's blisters were bursting while she stood in the water. What I saw next, I'll never forget as long as I live. When I lay on my dying bed, this image will inevitably pop into my head, though I will try hard to forget it. A boil on the girl's face burst, and a torrent of yellow pus and blood gushed forth. But as I watched, a huge, white worm, nearly a foot long and as big around as a nightcrawler, wriggled from her boil and dropped into the water. I watched it drift down the creek. It and others like it. When I turned back to the girl, she had a glazed look in her eyes, like she was sleeping and forgot to close her eyelids. She eventually collapsed in the water, and I watched the current carry her away. She never said a word to me. My research led me to learn her name. She was Betty Lancaster, a girl who disappeared from a neighbouring county a month before the church function that claimed so many lives. Her meth-head parents gave up on her quickly, and so did society. Since no one was looking for her at the time of the epidemic, she must have slipped through the quarantine by living in the woods. I don't know how she became infected. My guess is from eating strawberries someone threw out. I never told anyone about what I saw in the woods. Well, apart from my mother, who insisted I not tell anyone for fear of bad publicity. There are so many unanswered questions. To this day, no one knows who donated the strawberries to the function. The crates were left on the church steps early in the morning. No one saw who dropped them off, and no one knows where they came from. No one knows why the epidemic only affected the very young and the very old, or why it never happened anywhere else afterwards. I should have said something sooner. Mother's political career be damned. But I was afraid. I was young and confused, and by the time I was ready to come out with what I'd seen, it was years too late. So I'm telling this story now, while I still can. And there's a reason why I'm coming forth now. The other day, I was at a farmer's market, and I saw a baby gnawing on a strawberry. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or maybe my own scarred imagination. But I swear, I saw something white and wriggling at the corner of that baby's mouth. If you've ever had bedbugs, then you understand true suffering. For years after the ordeal is over, you'll know what it's like to jump at every perceived movement across your body. You'll have panic attacks every time a mysterious red bump appears on your skin. To live with bedbugs is to know anguish. I've had bedbugs twice in my life. The first time was when I was in 3rd grade. My parents' place became infested when my mother forgot to properly inspect her luggage after staying in a questionable hotel. Almost everything I owned was discarded, and our house had to be treated 3 times to get rid of every bug. I was too young to get how harrowing the experience was. The second time was during my sophomore year at college. The entire dorm building came down with an infestation, and that was when I finally understood how evil bedbugs are. I was covered in dozens of bites for weeks. All of my books, clothes, and electronics had to be treated or thrown away. I even got an infection in my foot from scratching the bites too much. That was 11 years ago, and I still have nightmares about bedbugs. Which brings us to my current situation. 4 days ago, I woke up and found 3 itchy red bumps on my arm. Bedbug bites are often clustered in groups of 3, so you understand where my mind went. I freaked out. I spent the rest of the day using a flashlight to peer into every crack in the wall. I stripped all of my sheets from the bed and combed them for blood spots, feces, or shed skin. I didn't find any, but that alone means nothing. Bedbugs are amazing at avoiding detection. I ran to the store to buy a mattress cover and a large bag of diatomaceous earth, which I applied liberally to every corner of my apartment. I went to bed that night praying I was wrong, praying the bites were some kind of rash. The next day, I couldn't find any new bites, but the ones on my arm were bigger. It was strange. They were swollen to the sizes bigger than any I'd experienced the other times I had bedbugs. They also hurt to touch, which made it that much worse when I had to scratch them to relieve the itching. Nothing else too bad happened on the second day apart from me flinching every time a hair on my body shifted. And then the 3rd day came, and I began to realise just how fucked up everything was. The bites on my arm had swollen to grotesque proportions. They were big enough now to press against each other, which made them constantly throb with pain. A green and yellow fluid slowly leaked from small holes at the crest of each bite. To make things worse, new bites had appeared. 3 on my leg, 2 on my shoulder, and 2 on my neck. I should have gone to the hospital then, but I don't have health insurance, and my fear of financial ruin overrided my fear that something terrible was happening to me. I convinced myself that the bites were infected, and I was still young and healthy enough for my immune system to fight it off on its own. Then, on day 4, I woke up to a wet pillow. green and yellow fluid was leaking from my left ear. In addition, the original 3 bites were starting to turn black. The bites from the previous day were starting to swell, and more than a dozen new bites had appeared on my arms, legs, chest, and genitals. I went into the bathroom and started to swab out my ear with a Q-tip. I know you're not supposed to stick Q-tips that far into your ear, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to feel clean. And then I felt it. The itchiness of tiny legs moving in my ear canal. I withdrew the Q-tip and something small and black fell out of my ear. I don't remember much of what happened next because I screamed and jumped backwards, which caused me to slip on the bathroom tile and hit my head on the tub. I was blacked out for a few minutes, and I spent an hour or two in a daze from my concussion. I'm going to the hospital now. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I hope they can fix it. I also hope they tell me what's causing all of this, because I know everything about bedbugs. And bedbugs aren't black.